Welcome to the Math Together show, where thoughtful math educators gather and learn together. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subdani. As you can see, we are missing a member today.
That's right.
Of our normal show hosts. And we miss her, but we understand that life changes happen. So we wish Joey all the best as he travels to school, to college this next couple of days, and send our wishes with them.
Yes.
And we're happy you're here.
Yes, welcome, welcome. Our topic today is we have a very special guest, Dr. Sheldon Akins, and he is going to be talking to us about this question: how do we become leaders for social justice in the math classroom? And before we do that, we'd like to have Heidi say a few things about Math Together.
Yes, and before we even do that, we would like to send our thoughts to all of those who are dealing with the wake of Hurricane Laura, and also to the family of Jacob Blake. And we pray for his continued recovery after the wake of his shooting this earlier this week. And we once again acknowledge that we have a big problem here in the United States, that we all as educators need to be a part of the solution, and we'll leave that there for the moment. We would love for you, this is a new time for us, we are adjusting to the school year, and we would love for you to say hello. Let us know where you're watching from in the comment section. Hit like if you would like. We are also able to take questions as we have our conversation today. So if you would like to do that in the comments section, do that. We're going to be pointing you to Dr. Akins' Leading Equity Center, where there'll be some additional resources where you can do the work for equity and social justice in your school. And additionally, we know that many of you are here as you're getting ready for a brand new school year. And so we're really excited about that. And we have a 20% off sale that we are running at the Math Together community, where you can join the community for 20% off, which is a great price. And we would love to see you there. We have additional resources and support for you that you can continually access through our website there. So we would love to see you there. Additionally, we're continuing our coffee chats at Looney Math Consulting. If you go there and hit contact us and you have a question about setting up for the math classroom and are wondering, I just need someone to coach me through this process, we are happy to help you there at our coffee chat.
Yes, and I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Sheldon Akins, who is the founder of the Leading Equity Center and host of the Leading Equity podcast. With over 11 years in education, he has served as a teacher, principal, and director of special education. Dr. Akins has a passion for helping educators accomplish equity practices in their schools. He has earned a bachelor's degree in social science education, a master's in educational leadership, and a doctorate in K-12 education. And so let's bring Dr. Akins into the studio. Hello, welcome to the Math Together show. We're so happy that you're here. Yeah, yay!
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. It's truly a pleasure and honor. Thank you.
And we're really thankful you're here. We know you're still at school. You're joining us from the West Coast, and so we appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us and to have this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
Yes, yes.
My pleasure. I'm always excited to talk about equity.
Good, because we need it. So we're going to kick it off today with a question that we're asking all of our guests so that we can get to know you and our listeners can get to know you. What is your why? How did you end up in education? And I know the beginning of your story is kind of interesting on what your first job was.
Sure. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was in the 12th grade. That was the moment where I had this awesome history teacher. His name was Mr. Fielder, and he was like our history teacher, and he was our basketball coach. And I mean, this guy had like swag. I mean, he used to just walk up and down the halls. His personality was very charismatic. It was just one of those like, man, I want to be like this guy when I grow up kind of thing. And so I said, you know what? I want to be a teacher just like this man, and I want to be a basketball coach. So I went to college. I majored in education, and that's exactly what I did. I got my history teaching degree, and I taught history, and I coached basketball. That was like what I did, and I've coached basketball for several years. Have enjoyed it to the fullest. But I have to give credit to Mr. Fielder at my old school back in Pine Forge Academy in Pennsylvania for the moment and the inspiration of becoming a teacher.
Amazing.
That's
Amazing.
Excellent. How did you end up where you are now? Because you're definitely not in Pennsylvania anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay. So so when I finished college, I literally was sitting at home in my apartment playing video games with my brother. And I remember I had a position as a supervisor for a call center in the area. And but they got rid of our apartment. And they were like, Sheldon, you're gonna have to go back to the phones, you're gonna have to go back to the basics, basically start over. And I'm like, man, I've been here for 3.5 years and I don't want to do that. But this was August. I had got my degree in May, but I didn't look for any teaching jobs all summer. Like, it was cool. I was going to be a manager. I was a supervisor. It was going to be fine. No big deal. Whatever. Did look for a job. I was fine. And now here I am in a dilemma because I'm realizing, oh, shoot, I didn't spend any time looking for work. And now school is starting and I'm trying to find a job, a teaching job. All the teaching jobs are. This is like 10 years ago when
Right.
there were teacher shortages. Like, things are a little different now. Like, you could find a job, but at those times, a history teacher wasn't as easy to find.
Right.
I get a random call sitting on the couch playing video games from a superintendent in the Virgin Islands, telling me, "Hey, I'm the superintendent in the Virgin Islands for school, and we need a history teacher. Do you want to come?" So I'm like, yes, I'll be there. You said Virgin Islands.
What time?
What time? And that's what that was my first teaching job. That's what brought me here. And so I worked there for 2 years. I got married. I had a child. Started working on my master's degree. We moved to Florida because I love the island of St. Croix. It was great. But I'm a city guy. I grew up in the States and just got homesick and just needed to be back on the mainland. And so I spent some time in Florida teaching, ultimately got my master's and looked for a principal job. I landed a principal job in Louisiana, and then got called to go to a larger school in Oregon. So I did that for a couple more years as a principal at a larger school, and then I ended up getting my PhD and thinking that you get your PhD and you're supposed to become a professor or something. So I started looking for jobs in higher ed, and I never thought I would end up in Idaho. It was not on my radar. It was a random application I put in, and they called me and they gave me a job, and here I am. We've been in Idaho for the last 4 years.
I love that story, and I feel like you just go wherever the calling is, and that's really not everybody would do that. So that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that's how I got here, and currently I'm a special education director. I ended up going back to K-12. I missed the kids, and so now I'm a special ed director here on a reservation here in Idaho.
Cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I am wondering how you started with the Leading Equity Center. and the work that you do there. That's how I first came in contact with your work. So
I started podcasting. About a year ago, maybe no, 2 years ago. Man, it's been that long. 2 years ago, it was almost like May-ish, June-ish. I was like, I want to start producing content. And it was just a matter of, do I want to do blogging? Do I want to just create a website? I just want to kind of get myself out there. That was kind of the goal at the time. And so I wasn't sure what it looked like. I knew that I don't really like to write. I've been sitting on this idea that I'm going to write a book one day. It still hasn't happened. One day I'll get there.
Yeah, you put it out there now, so now it's coming.
I know,
you know that. The moment that you say,
right? More pressure on myself, but
yeah,
it's one of those things. Like one of these days, I'm going to write a book. But I'm like, I know I'm not going to consistently blog. So I didn't really know what other options there were until I went to a principals conference in Chicago a few years ago. And I was just looking at, how you look at the different sessions that they had available. And I saw this session called Podcasting 101. Okay, well, let's check this out. So I go into the session and I meet these guys, Danny Sunshine Bauer, William Parker, Jethro Jones, some podcasters in the education space. And I meet them and they just go through the whole process. I mean, they literally broke it down. And I'm like watching this, taking notes, and I'm like, oh, this really isn't that hard. And so I'm like, oh, well, I didn't really have anything or ideas coming in. But as I was listening to them, I was like, you know what? I love listening to podcasts. But the one thing that I would say that I don't get to hear or see a lot is I don't see a lot of representation from people of color as the host, let alone guest of the show. The other thing that I don't see a lot of is the topics that are covered are typically, generally, how to be a better school leader or how to be a better teacher. Very general in no sense. And I mean, they're great, they're amazing. But what I wanted to find was shows or a show that was geared towards speaking through an equity-minded lens. Like this is what we talk about every episode. And so I couldn't find it. And I'm like, okay, I want a podcast. How about I podcast about equity? And I can try to fill a space and a void that's not there. And so that's what I started doing is I started podcasting 2 years ago. People actually started to listen to my show, I guess. And then I started getting questions. And next thing I know, I'm starting an online course. I'm opening up an LLC, and I'm doing virtual summits and webinars, and it's just gotten to where we're at now. But I didn't start it with all that in mind. I wasn't trying to build a business. I wasn't trying to, I just literally wanted to learn more myself and share it with the world. And here we are.
Well, I can tell you that in the last few days, I've listened to at least 3 of your podcasts, and the guests that you have on are remarkable and fascinating and all about equity, but so many different topics within equity that, I mean, you have over 100 episodes. You did that in 2 years? God love you.
Yeah, well, so then so early on, I was like just trying to build it. It was just kind of like one of those things like, I reach out to someone. I'm like, hey, can we connect for an interview? When are you available? Time zones or whatever. Sometimes I was doing interviews at 3 a.m. and 10 at night and weekends. I was just trying to get people on my show. Now I'm at a place where people reach out to me a lot more. I set my times. This is when I'm available. This is when I do the interviews. It's gotten a lot better, but man, early on. And so what was happening was I would get a lot of episodes built up. So one of the things that I learned at the Podcasting 101 is always have 10 episodes available. You never want to be stressing over content. If you have at least 2 months worth, then you're good. But what happened was people kept saying yes. And so I ended up with 3 or 4 months worth of episodes. I'm felt bad telling people, yeah, this won't come out for 6 months. And so I started just doing 2 a week. And so once I started doing 2 a week, then it just kind of like it just grew and grew and grew. And then again, once I got to a certain place, it was just like, okay, I'm going to go back to once a week because there's a lot happening right now in my life. But early on, I was doing 2 a week.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it is definitely. And then with the virtual summit, I think that maybe it was a little over a year ago. That's when I first started listening and watching and participating in that. And I think that having that lens within the classroom, and because you bring on a variety of voices and your voice as well, lend an experience that many people may not have. And so I think, sometimes we look at things monolithically, or far too often we look at, things monolithically. So I can speak to my experience as a first generation American with my dad immigrating here from India, but that's not the same immigrant story as someone else. And it's not the same growing up as a biracial kid, and like that's not the same as someone else's. So you have this wide variety of people and voices that you are listening to, and you're providing your audience with the opportunity to learn from. And I think that's really critical. We are coming at things from kind of the math lens, and how we set up or become leaders for social justice in the math classroom. I think we can talk generally as well. But how do we do that, and what are the steps for that? I think there are times when there's no time like the present, but we also don't want people just rushing in, not knowing exactly what they're doing either, because you can cause just as much harm to children as if you didn't say anything.
Yeah, and this is a question I get a lot, Molly and Heidi, because people often will say, well, it makes sense to be culturally responsive and to be socially just with English and social studies. Those are easy, but I teach math or I teach science. How do I do that with math? Like it's an equation, it's a formula. Where does social justice come in with something like that? And so I normally respond with, well, do you do word problems in your classroom? And most of the teachers that teach math will say, yes, I have word problems. I say, okay, you could easily create socially just word problems in your classroom, and go from there. You could talk about gentrification, for example. You could say, depending on what grade level, but you could say things like, there's a Starbucks that's going to be built into this historically Black neighborhood. The locals don't want the locals don't want the Starbucks, and they're going to come in and they're going to buy this property for X amount of dollars. And then there's this, you can really go into various equations by bringing in stuff that might impact some of your students' community. That's just one example. You could bring in situations like, there's this new tax bill, or there's this new levy or whatever that's coming about, and we're trying to figure out, people don't think it's fair, or maybe there's a bill for body cams for the local police department, and it's going to cost this much money, and some of the people are against it, some of the people are for it, and here's the reasons why. How much is this? All right, can you subtract? And you can go through and create your own word problems that are socially just. Just don't go into some stereotypes. Don't be like Devontae lives in a house whose father is in prison, and he has a 10-year sentence, and he's only done 5. How many years does he have left? Like, don't do the nonsense like that. But you could create experiences with your word problems that you can help your students kind of learn about what's happening within their community. You can be very specific that way. And then not only can you create these word problems, you can engage in conversations as well. You can talk about how does this impact you? How are you feeling right now these days? And you can really dig into it. So it's not just the math experience, the academic side of things, but you also connect and develop their relationships with students from the social and the emotional side of things, that you kind of can learn your students to see things that are relevant to them within the content that you're providing to them. It takes some extra work. Sometimes teachers just like hand the canned questions that come up. This is what the textbook gives me. It already has 50 word problems easily that I can that are easily accessible. And why go? I got 100 kids and I got 5 classes. I don't have time to create individualized word problems. So it does take some extra work. But let's be real. Like, those word banks that a lot of us see are basic stuff, and it's not socially just. It's not talking about political things. It's not talking about things that are everyday experiences that are impacting our students. So yeah, that'll take some time. It'll take a little work, but you can create your own word bank. You can develop a word bank with your colleagues. So if you're teaching 5th grade math and you come together during your PLCs and you create these questions that you could share, or if you can go on your Facebook groups and share with each other and just do the work ahead of time. And then now you have a bank that you've created yourself, instead of depending on what your local textbook company is providing you, because they're not going to provide you anything that's socially just.
Wow, I really love that idea of kind of using it as, I see that as using it as professional development if you're developing them with your colleagues, because you really do have to put yourself in situations that you've potentially never been together. And that creates equity among teachers as well. I really love that idea.
Yeah, you could say, there's a Black Lives Matter protest, the crowd control, there's 1,000 people there, and then another crowd of anti Black Lives Matter shows up. So now you have how many people are at the rally, whatever. You can put those kind of things together. And I'm not a math teacher, so I'm probably not the most creative word problem person, but just basic concepts of what's impacting communities and how you can utilize that to be more relevant to your students. Your students are talking about these things. They're participating in these rallies. They're participating in these protests. They're out there, and their families are as well. How do we, help them or show them that they do matter these days, and help them connect with what's happening with their community inside the classroom as well.
And I think that's a critical thing. Sometimes, and I'm not going to say this happens regularly, but sometimes some within the math community will say, well, math is not political. We don't believe that, but that is, it is political, and we use math for good and bad, and it has been used in that way historically here in the United States. And so if we can't connect with our students, we can't build the classroom community that we want to really work on the mathematics if we're not addressing the lives that our students live, and we're not looking at the environment that they are living in, and the feelings that they have about the world that they are currently in. And I think that is such a big part of the work that we have to do, particularly if you're in a virtual space like many of us are this year, is we have to take the time to do that and to hear from our students, and that they know that we care about more than just the content that we're teaching.
Yeah, I think this year more than ever that's important, right? I mean, this is what we hear teachers talking about all the time is, how are we going to remotely get to know our students? And that is by far the most important thing, that students know that they are in school regardless of where they are, and they are safe and they are loved, and we care about you, the student.
Yeah. But when we don't say anything at all, and we just brush over it and business as usual, and we just keep going as if nothing is happening in this world, it does send a message to our students. I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of white teachers that say, you know what, I'm just very uncomfortable having these conversations. And you don't have to lead the conversations. Let your students lead those conversations. Allow space for them to engage. If you feel uncomfortable, just listen. It's not about you anyway. You know, you don't have to try to insert yourself into that conversation. Just listen and learn from your students and how they're feeling, but engage in it. Like let them talk. And again, you can still do it with math. That's not something that's just relative to one subject or PE only or English only or social studies only. Like, you can have these conversations. You can set things up in a way that that allows the space to happen, but you have to be intentional.
I love that idea of letting your students lead the conversation, because I think there are a lot of white people that are of teachers, that are afraid to start that conversation. But you're right, now more than ever, students can lead this conversation. I love it.
Yeah, we've seen, students be the ones to lead in many places. And so that is giving them that agency in the classroom as well, I think is a critical piece that as educators we often have to consider and know, step back. Like, we're often not the expert on this. And so step back and listen and know that the experiences that your students are having are real, and listen.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love that.
Just listen.
So Sheldon, our time is, this has gone by so quickly. I don't know how our time has slipped by, but maybe you want to talk about something that you're working on now.
Right now, I'm just building up the podcast. I just started a membership. It's currently we just closed the membership, but I always have content available. I have free stuff. I try to do a mixture between kind of paid stuff and free resources. So, you can always go on the website, leadingequitycenter.com, and find all those resources. I do want to write a book one day. So that's always something that's on my list of, what I'm working on kind of things. Besides that, we just started school here at my school this week. So we just made it through our first week. We went to 4 days. And so today is Thursday and we're out. So we're out for the weekend.
Congratulations on making it through your first week. That's quite a feat this year of all years.
I know, and we're open too. So we're not doing the online thing. So it's been just trying to learn how to breathe in a mask all day has been interesting, and having our students keep their mask on is the other one. So it's been an interesting week.
Well, we're so thrilled to have had you here. The work that you're doing is incredible. The guests that you bring on to your podcast are amazing, and I'm going to continue to listen to them. I really urge our listeners to tune in to any of his episodes. They are really great, really great.
And you will learn and hear. Even if we think, okay, I've been doing reading and I've been listening and I've been there's still so many other things. The more that you learn, you often realize that you don't really know much of anything. And so we have to continue to be listening and hearing from diverse voices and opening ourselves up to hearing from others during this year and every year after. I'm considering it like my self-care at this point. Like, okay, I'm hearing, listening, and continuing to learn in a space that really speaks to me. So we are so appreciate you coming on today and talking about your work. And definitely check out the Leading Equity Center. There's always great resources coming to me in my inbox. And so we hope that those of you who are following and listening to us here will check that out as well.
Thanks so much for being here with us today. We'll catch you later.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
So we are just going to wrap up here. We appreciate you being here and listening to us today. So we're going to continue with a new time slot at 7 p.m. East Coast time. And we want to remind you again of the opportunity to talk with one of us if you are planning for the math classroom and just want some feedback on that. You can sign up for a coffee chat by clicking on Contact Us at Looney Math Consulting. The Math Together website and community is there as well to support you in that. We have our 20% off back to school sale that is on starting today until next Friday on the 4th. So we would love to see you and have you join us there in that community. And Molly's going to talk about what's happening next week.
Yes, next week we have a special guest who will be back, Sue Looney, who's missing today so she can take her son to college. But she will be back next week, and we're going to talk about the importance of early numeracy to develop number sense. And she's going to kick that off for us. So we are very excited to be back next week at our new time of 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we want to remind you to always be curious.
See you, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Bye.